Hello, Internet people. My name is Cassandra, and I'm a death keeper in the practice of sacred geometry. And the other day, I was leaving off with a follow up story to um, why people like me, my complexion, this pale, shouldn't be calling themselves white, and why our history is very important, at least for us to know, especially if we want to be in this fight and actually be on the right side of history. And the way I want to address that today is with a story from the grave. It's a very popular one. It was also adapted into a movie that I was actually the reason for my exposure to this story, if I'm being totally honest. Um, I knew many like it. I did not know of this one specifically, and the one I'm referring to that many people my age will remember immediately is Mississippi Burning, which portrayed. It was a Gene Hackman old movie from the probably early '90s, if not earlier than that, uh, about the murders of James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Shwerner on June 21st, 1964, in Neshoba County, Mississippi. And I know that this is a very high profile story, that a lot of people know it, so I'm not going to be hitting all of the fine points here. All you need to really know about this is this was a murder carried out by the Ku Klux Klan in Mississippi, and it was one of the triggering events that led to things like the Selma March, civil rights movement, um, etc., so forth. It was a continuation of this, and mainly in trying to oust Jim Crow from the South, because up to that point, the South had kept this kind of hush hush death grip over communities and areas like Neshoba County, and instituted their own racist policies and laws. And they were constantly flaunting states' rights over the federal government's ability to interfere with them. And unfortunately, up to that point, the federal government was more than happy to play along. That was until the murder of these three boys. Now, these men, I should be respectful here and say that these were men. They were members of the ACLU. Now, they were young men, and they were, I believe, college age and probably in college themselves. But the thing that was kind of the powder keg here wasn't the death of James Chaney, unfortunately, because up to that point, many black people had lost their lives to lynchings and all sorts of horrible shit that we're seeing coming up again today. Yeah, it didn't go away. It's just been hiding underneath the rug where we kept sweeping everything. No, the thing that really got the federal government's attention and that drove the UCLA's entire campaign for justice in this, whether they'll say it or not, was the deaths of Andrew Goodman and Michael Shwerner. And as you might have guessed, both of those young men were white. This is and this is where that conversation from yesterday is kind of reveals itself. And I look at it as things that we learned from that event, and then there's the things that we should have learned from that event. And we'll start with the things that we learned from that event. One, that if we really want to get people's attention, we throw white bodies in front of it, apparently. It's a really disgusting and sad truth, and it's a tactic that's being used today because of how badly BIPOC, Native, Latinx, etc. can be targeted. The lesson we should have learned from that was that wasn't enough. And it shouldn't have taken 3 deaths to accomplish justice. And you might be thinking, like, what more could have been done? What more can we do? And I'm not trying to litigate the past, because what happened happened. I'm, as I've said from the get-go about this, and my position as a death keeper is that we take the lessons of the dead and we learn from them to make better futures. So when our government refused to listen to the victims of black people before, until the bodies of Andrew Goodman and Michael Shwerner turned up missing with James Chaney, then the lesson was, we needed people in those offices with ears that could hear. And we still need people in those offices and in those places with ears that can hear, whether it be the FBI or it be the presidency. That's not negotiable. And it wasn't negotiable then. And it was an absolute travesty that it took that much of a high profile case. So much so that it got its own movie. Like many, 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 many events like that eventually became memorialized in films. It's too slow. And we're missing a lot by letting things like that happen. Now, we'll hear that justice moves slowly, but tell me how many times you've seen the justice system pick up its feet and move very quickly when it really wanted to. And we're back to that part where the answer, the thing we should have learned from there, was that when we figured out they weren't listening to us, the answer wasn't to lose more of our own and raise hell. It was to put our people in their places, to get them out, to vote, to do all the things that we're still struggling with today. Another lesson that was learned during that time, and it's unfortunate, but it was a giant flare to the Klan where they could and could not trespass any longer. They learned lessons from their mistakes too, oftentimes the wrong ones and the worst ones. But their lesson was that they had to be more careful and more selective about who did what and who carried what out. And so one of the things that you commonly hear, especially in civil rights spaces, and especially where BIPOC is, they know this as well as I do, that for most of the Klan, they just gave up their bed sheets for suits. And that's why we have the problems that we have right now. And that's one of these things where I've heard people say things like, I could never run, I could never hold that office, I could never do these jobs. And part of the reason that a lot of people feel like that, I think, because I've felt like that too. And in fact, another story about that at some point, if I even decide to carry that one out still, because not gonna lie, things have been rough, but we're not talking about that today. We're talking about Neshoba County, Mississippi. See, I made mention, and I think part of the reason why this story sticks with me so bad is because of that affiliated family I mentioned in a prior video, and how absolutely treacherous that is. And to know that they were still doing what they were doing. They still had their hand signs, their little gestures, their club meets. They were still doing the same shit they were doing before, but they hadn't been caught yet. Whatever it was that they've done. And as somebody who escaped from those places, who picked up their life many times and ran, and I think as anybody who has also done the same thing, who's come from those spaces will tell you, they learned. And they learned the worst lessons and the wrong lessons. And we didn't notice that. We just kept treating them as idiots. We just kept humiliating them. We just kept on doing what we're doing. We kept focusing on our music and all of our creative endeavors, made them and watched them as they twisted and flailed. But we didn't see that when you subject someone, and it doesn't really matter what group we're talking about, it doesn't matter what you could take this from like kindergarten and class and elementary all the way through high school. You can see this play out in some college. You can see this play out in society constantly. And it's a failure. And it's an easy failure to get away with. And it's the failure to outcast somebody and then expect your problem to have disappeared. Or that you will somehow see that thing that you exiled. They'll have a revelation and come to their senses. They don't. Not usually, anyways. For a lot of people that get kicked to the curb like that, they just entrench themselves more. They feel like they're justified in the way that they were targeted and treated, and etc. And so you could throw your hands up and ask yourself, well, if that, damned if you do, damned if you don't, what do you do? Well, the irony is that in any civilized world, and what a lot of the rest of the world has already figured out, is that if they're violent and they're causing real physical problems to people, not property. Well, we can count property too, but really it's the people that we're caring about here, and the messages that get sent out that flag to others what they can and can't do and can and can't say. If they get violent, you put them through the courts and you send them to jail. And if they're just obnoxious or unhinged even, you probably send them to therapy. And if you send them to jail, you're also sending them to therapy. Because the way our system is set up right now doesn't work if you just try to punish. If you keep telling a person they're wrong, but you don't tell them how or why, or you don't give them any tools or means to fix themselves, they'll just entrench further. And they'll find other people that you did this to, and they'll do this all over again. That's why the Nazis came back, because we didn't fix that problem the first time around. And I have plenty of thoughts about how to fix it this time around, and it's one of those things that would scare the shit out of every single one of them if they knew we were thinking like this. Like closing down all the ports so they can't escape again. Like actually putting their face on bulletins for people to flag them. Like telling other nations, hey, if you find one of our whack jobs over there, let us know so we can bring them back. So they can face trial and get some help. If they'll take it. If they won't, they can stay in timeout. But ignoring the problem, or making the problem poor, or degrading the problem, or this constant utterance of things, is how we got here. And another lesson to that lesson that we should have learned. And I'm going to talk to, this is straight for the folks like me. This is the white folks. Or anybody who's calling themselves white still. You want to be a good ally? When you hear those names, you have to recognize that Andrew Goodman and Michael Shwerner were people in that murder. They weren't more than James Chaney because they were white. In fact, in their minds, as somebody who probably would move in the same ways that they do, they were there to protect James Chaney. And they really thought for a moment that their whiteness would keep the Klan away from them while they did their work. And it didn't. That's a lesson we should have learned. And on top of that lesson, we should have learned that When you step away from the ranks and you inherit the name traitor, you take the risk with it. And you do so with pride and glee. And you do so knowing that it's not your story. You're trying to fix your story, because your story is what led to becoming the villain in other people's stories. You're not the hero. You're helping. There shouldn't be any white person who goes to the front of the lines anymore when our allies have been punished so severely. And the only way I see that happening for any of us to, if you come into this thinking you're gaining recognition, first off, you ain't changed. That's white people shit. We're not doing that anymore. But the second part is, if you actually do attain recognition, as there is an attorney, a white Southern attorney out there who packs houses, and he works very hard in the civil rights sector. He has recognition, and it was black people who recognized him. But it's not because he's white. It's because of what he's saying, because of what he's doing, because of what he's working, and because he knows he's not the hero of that story. One good little failsafe that I picked up a long time ago, and I played with it from time to time. I still use it from time to time. It's all about like titling. See, in a normally sane framework, world, etc., you don't get to go around calling yourself things. And if you do, you'd better be it. You better be about it. You better be the thing that you're calling yourself. If you decide to do it yourself. Because in the same times, titles were given. And they were given to people by other people who recognized their gifts. King, queen, knight. These were inherited titles from the people around them, who saw the exceptionalism inside of them and said, hey, we're going to follow you. That's how you earn true acclaim. That's how you carry honor and you build something for yourself. Is that it has to be given to you. You can't take it. Now, there's certain ways that changes a little bit. I myself am in a place where I have not been able to find somebody like me. I found people who have been in very low, like 20 percentiles, a little bit of a matchup. But for the most part, I'm not in touch with people at my functions. And so I've had to learn and adopt a lot from that. If I didn't, I'd still be a ghost. And we wouldn't be talking right now. And that's about calling. That's not about trying to take center stage. It's another thing I talked about. White people got to realize that the work that we got to do is going to be 5-10 times more than what anybody else around us has done. And it's not that way as a punishment. It's going to feel like that because we have so much more catching up to do. When the rich assholes decided to use melting pot thinking, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, to drown out the different cultures that make up whiteness, I guess, they were fucking all of us over. They were violating us, our minds, our spirits, our lands, our traditions. said our food was shit. Now, come on, y'all. I know that the joke is out there, especially when it comes to white people. But where do y'all think spaghetti came from? It's, and a lot of desserts, too. And stew. Your roasts and stuff like that. That was some poor white people shit. And we had to use every little damn thing that we had around us just like everybody else. Because we're not that different at the end. And if we had ever bothered to treat other people from different cultures like that, to just bring them into our homes and feed them and play music and do all the things that they do, instead of acting like, ooh, no, you're the wrong ones. You're gross, you're icky, look at your... Ugh. What the fuck? Where does that even come from? What is that even about? At the end of the day. When they set us up with all that shit, when they tried to give us benefits and land and all of that, they were just using us. We were still slaves to them. Even if they did bring us into the big tent, they gave us bread and circus. And we took it. Sorry. Been a bit of a day. And actually, that might actually be my cue to wrap it up. James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Shwerner should still be alive today. Or at the very least, not been killed by the goddamn Klan. And white people need to figure out what that really means before we turn around and make things worse again. And we screw up another opportunity to correct the mistakes of our past. Spells and blessings, everyone. Stay safe out there.